Snow fell thick and soundless the night the Carsons first arrived in Ashthorne. The town was little more than a scattering of shops and homes strung along a single road, framed by the black silhouettes of leafless trees. Beyond the town's edge, the road twisted upward, winding toward a hill where something vast and brooding waited in the dark. The Harvest Inn. Even after decades of abandonment, it loomed against the horizon like a sentinel. 4 stories of shadow, its steep roofline jagged from missing shingles, its windows shuttered like closed eyes. A wrought iron gate leaned crookedly at the entrance to the drive, one hinge rusted through, the other squealing in the wind. Inside the car, Evelyn Carson hugged her coat tight and tried to smile at her husband. "It looks big. Big is good," Mark said. His breath fogged the glass as he leaned forward, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the headlights on the mansion's front doors. Big means potential. In the backseat, Jacob, only 12, pressed his nose to the window. "It looks haunted." Lila, 16, smirked. "Haunted? That's just what you want to see in the dark. It's just old." But her voice was thinner than her words. Mark turned off the engine. Silence rushed in, broken only by the wind whining through the trees. The inn stood waiting, black and still, snow gathering on its steps. "This," Mark whispered, as though reverent, "is going to be our future." The realtor had been too eager. Evelyn remembered the way the woman's hands shook as she pushed the keys across the table, how her voice brightened unnaturally when she said, "It's a bargain, really. Historic property like that? It's practically begging to be saved." No one else had wanted it. Some claimed the inn had burned once, though the fire hadn't destroyed it completely. Others told stories of travelers who came for the Halloween festivities and were never seen again. Evelyn had laughed nervously when she first heard it. Now, standing before the inn in the deep hush of winter, she didn't feel like laughing. Still, they unlocked the doors and stepped inside. The air was heavy, stale with the smell of soot and mildew. The lobby stretched wide before them, its ceiling lost in shadows. A grand staircase curved upward, its banister coated in dust. A chandelier hung overhead, crystal teardrops dim beneath cobwebs. Their footsteps echoed on cracked tile. Jacob clutched his mother's hand. "I don't like it." "You will," Mark said firmly, though he avoided looking at the darkened hallway leading deeper into the inn. "We'll clean it up. You'll see." And so they began. The winter months bled into spring. Every morning the family rose early, armed with buckets, scrub brushes, and tools. The sound of hammers and saws filled the halls where silence had reigned for years. Dust poured from the walls with every stroke of a broom. Evelyn spent hours airing out rooms, throwing open shutters so pale sunlight could spill inside. At first, the work was grueling. The roof leaked, pipes groaned as though reluctant to wake. But slowly, the inn began to change. Beneath grime, the wood shone rich and dark. The stained glass above the front doors gleamed in fractured rainbows. Even the cracked ballroom floorboards took polish, hinting at the grandeur they once held. Some days, Evelyn could almost believe it was only a house. A vast, tired house waiting for love. But other days, unease lingered. Jacob swore he heard footsteps upstairs while they worked in the lobby. "It's creaking," Mark said, brushing it off. "Old wood does that." When Evelyn opened the parlor windows one morning, she found faint soot smeared across the sill, though no fireplace had been lit in years. She cleaned it quickly, not mentioning it, and once, while scrubbing the grand staircase, Lila paused, heart thundering, certain she had seen someone standing at the landing above. A tall man, his shoulders cloaked in shadow. When she blinked, the landing was empty. She told herself she was imagining it. The inn was full of echoes. By summer, the town began to take notice. Locals who had once whispered about the Carsons' folly now slowed their cars to watch the slow transformation. Children dared each other to creep closer to the gates. Old men muttered over coffee at the diner. "Looks like the Harvest Inn's waking up again." The Carsons kept working, and the inn, quietly, kept watching. By late August, the Carsons had fallen into a rhythm. Mornings were filled with labor. Mark up on ladders fixing roof tiles, Evelyn coaxing life back into the garden, Jacob chasing tools that rolled away, Lila scraping layers of paint until her arms ached. Afternoons brought a slower pace. Polishing banisters, mending curtains, walking through the halls and dreaming aloud about guests who would one day laugh and chatter through them. They decided to celebrate all their hard work by hosting a masquerade ball for people in town to see their progress. The dream was becoming real. At night, though, things felt different. The inn grew restless. It began subtly. A door that Evelyn knew she had shut would stand open by morning. A chair left tucked neatly under a table would be pulled back, angled toward the center of the room. Once, Mark found a hammer he had set down in the ballroom lying across the upstairs landing. "Someone's playing pranks," he grumbled, glaring at Jacob. But Jacob's wide eyes and shaking head made Evelyn shiver. In September, the weather cooled. Mist gathered around the inn each dawn, curling like fingers around the porch rails. The town held a harvest fair, and though the Carsons attended, Evelyn couldn't ignore the way locals eyed them warily, as though wondering how long they'd last. An old woman, wrapped in a black shawl, approached her near the cider stand. Her face was thin as paper, her eyes clouded yet sharp. "You live in it now," the woman whispered. "The inn?" "Yes," Evelyn said cautiously. "We're restoring it. We're hoping to open before Thanksgiving." The woman shook her head. "It doesn't want to be open. It remembers." "Remembers what?" Evelyn asked, but the woman had already turned away, disappearing into the crowd. The first real disturbance came the following week. Evelyn was in the library, dusting shelves heavy with books left behind by past owners. As she pulled a thick ledger free, something fluttered loose and fell at her feet. A slip of paper, brown and brittle. She picked it up and frowned. The handwriting was sharp, almost frantic. October 28th, another guest missing. Third this week. The others pretend not to notice, but the walls know. Her skin prickled. She shoved the note back inside the ledger and told herself it was nonsense, a remnant of someone's long-ago imagination. But that night, as she lay in bed, she dreamed of a door slamming shut in the hall below. When she woke, her heart racing, she found her bedroom door open wide, though she was certain she'd locked it. By mid-October, the atmosphere shifted entirely. The air inside the inn was colder than the autumn wind outside. The walls creaked at night, as if settling, yet the rhythm was too steady, too deliberate. Like footsteps pacing, shadows pooled in corners even when lamps burned brightly. One evening, Jacob refused to come downstairs for dinner. Evelyn found him curled in his bed, blanket pulled to his chin. "There's someone in the hall," he whispered. "He was watching me." Evelyn checked. The hall was empty, of course. But as she left Jacob's room, she swore she heard the faint click of a piano key, a lonely note drifting from the darkened ballroom. Lila grew withdrawn. She lingered at mirrors, staring as though expecting her reflection to move differently than she did. Once, Evelyn caught her whispering to herself, only to realize Lila was whispering to the mirror. When Evelyn pulled her away, the glass fogged suddenly, though the room was cold. And there, in the mist, faint words formed, "Stay out." The family pushed harder, working late into the night to ready the inn for its grand reopening. Mark insisted they were so close, just one final push and they could welcome guests in time for Thanksgiving travel. But October had other plans. On the 29th, Evelyn came downstairs to find the chandelier in the lobby swaying wildly, as though struck by unseen hands. On the 30th, Mark discovered every single chair in the dining room arranged in a perfect circle, facing inward. And on Halloween morning, when the family descended into the lobby, they found the ledger lying open on the reception desk. The ink was fresh. October 31st. Tonight they will all return. Tonight, the inn breathes again. The Harvest Inn was awake. And it was waiting. Halloween arrived with a brittle, cold wind that rattled the shutters like bony fingers. The Carsons had tried to ignore the strange warnings in the ledger, the unsettling notes, the whispers, the rearranged furniture. They told themselves exhaustion explained it all. They had to, because the masquerade ball was that very night. Invitations had been printed, word had spread. If they cancelled now, after all their work, the Harvest Inn's reputation would be ruined before it even began. So they dressed. Mark pulled on a simple black suit and a half mask. Evelyn wore a sweeping gown of deep wine red, its lace sleeves brushing her wrists. Lila insisted on a silver domino mask, sharp and gleaming, while Jacob clung to his pirate costume, wooden sword clutched tight. Candles glowed in every window. The ballroom chandelier blazed. Pumpkins lined the staircases, their carved mouths grinning. Outside, the wind howled, but within, the inn gleamed like a jewel in the night. And then guests arrived. At first, Evelyn was relieved. Costumed figures came through the doors. Neighbors, travelers, townsfolk curious about the reborn inn. They filled the ballroom with laughter and music, their masks glinting as they spun across the polished floor. But as midnight neared, Evelyn noticed something strange. Some faces she didn't recognize. Not townsfolk, not anyone she had seen at the market or church. Their costumes were elaborate, strangely old-fashioned. Gowns that swept the floor, waistcoats stitched with gold thread, masks of porcelain and bone. They moved with a grace too perfect, too silent, their laughter hollow and echoing. And when Evelyn asked Mark if he knew them, he frowned. "I thought you invited them." The music shifted, no longer the lively reel chosen by their fiddler, but a mournful, swelling waltz that seemed to rise from the very walls. Guests glided across the floor, spinning in time, their movements strangely synchronized. Jacob clung to Evelyn's hand. "Mom," he whispered, "they don't have feet." She looked down. Her breath caught. Some dancers floated inches above the floor, gowns trailing weightlessly, shoes never touching the wood. She backed away, heart pounding, but the guests turned toward her as one, masked faces tilting. 100 hollow eyes seemed to stare through her. Upstairs, Lila stood before a mirror, drawn as if by invisible strings. In the glass, her reflection no longer moved with her. It smiled when she did not. It lifted its hand when hers stayed limp. Then, with deliberate slowness, the reflection reached forward, pressing its palm against the inside of the glass. The surface rippled like water. "Join us," it whispered. Downstairs, Mark tried to usher guests out, but the doors wouldn't budge. The grand oak double doors rattled beneath his strength, locked tight though no key turned them. He pounded until his fists ached. Behind him, the masquerade continued. A figure in a plague doctor's mask drifted close, its beak long and shadowed. When Mark demanded it leave, it simply tilted its head, then leaned close enough for him to feel a chill seep through his suit. "You're late," it rasped. "The inn has waited." The chandelier flickered, the room dimmed, the air grew thick with rot and perfume, a sickly mix. The guests shed their masks, not pulling them away, but dissolving them, as if the masks were their faces. Flesh gave way to hollow sockets, bone gleamed, lips peeled back in grins too wide. The Carsons screamed, trying to gather together in the chaos. But the dancers only drew nearer, reaching with skeletal hands, whispering, chanting. "Stay, stay, stay." Evelyn's eyes fell to the ledger, now lying open on the reception desk. A fresh entry scrawled itself in frantic ink, October 31st. "The living are ours to keep." In that moment, the inn roared alive. Windows burst open, wind howled through the halls, curtains writhed like serpents. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding, contracting, groaning as if the building hungered. Candles blew out one by one, plunging the masquerade into darkness. The last thing Evelyn saw before the lights died was Jacob's terrified face, his small hand clutching hers with all his strength. Then, nothing but the sound of the waltz, echoing endlessly through the dark. Morning broke pale and gray. The ballroom was empty, everyone from town was gone. Candles guttered in cold pools of wax. The chandelier swung gently, its light long gone. The pumpkins on the stairs had rotted overnight, their carved grins sagging, blackened and collapsing inward. Evelyn woke on the ballroom floor with Jacob beside her, his small hand still clutching hers. Mark stirred nearby, bruised but alive. Upstairs, they found Lila curled beneath a blanket, trembling, unable to speak. The inn was silent, too silent, no music, no footsteps, no spectral laughter. The masquerade guests were gone as if they had never existed. Only the ledger remained on the desk, closed once more. When Evelyn dared to open it, the last entry had vanished. The pages were clean, crisp, waiting. She snapped it shut and shoved it in a drawer. She could not bear to look. In the days that followed, they tried to carry on. Repairs were made where shutters had splintered, where glass had shattered. The kitchen was scrubbed of soot, the rooms set in order again. They told themselves it had been exhaustion, hysteria, a shared dream too vivid for reason. Thanksgiving neared, reservations trickled in. Travelers were eager for a cozy inn in the mountains, for warmth by the fire, for a place that promised comfort in the cold. The Carsons smiled. They welcomed guests. They poured cider, roasted turkey, and played cheerful music. And for a time, it seemed the Harvest Inn was truly reborn. But at night, Evelyn would sometimes hear it. A faint waltz drifting down the halls. The rustle of silk skirts sweeping the stairs. The whisper of masked laughter just beyond her door. When she checked on the children, she found Jacob whispering to someone unseen. When she asked who, he only said, "The dancers wanted me to come back." And once, as she polished the front desk, she noticed the ledger resting there again, though she was certain she had hidden it away. It lay open to a blank page. A pen rested beside it. And, as she stood watching, her hand began to twitch, her fingers itching with the urge to write. The inn seemed to breathe around her. Walls shifting, floors groaning, as though the house itself was waiting. The Harvest Inn had been fed. But it was not finished. never finished. The Carsons kept their inn open. Guests came and went, smiles were exchanged, laughter filled the halls, and fires warmed the hearth. But in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, the masquerade still danced. Masks gleamed in the mirrors. Footsteps echoed in empty halls. The walls whispered their hunger. And the ledger waited, patient, for the next hand to write. If you enjoyed tonight's stay at the Harvest Inn, don't forget to check out on your way out by hitting that like button and booking your next reservation by clicking subscribe. And remember, guests are encouraged to leave a review.